A single remark by Susie Wiles froze all of Washington. Donald Trump has the temperament of an alcoholic. Susie Wiles, the most powerful woman in the White House, the person who controls the president's schedule, decides who gets into the Oval Office and who is pushed to the margins, has just appeared in a series of 11 interviews with Vanity Fair. This was not a leak, not an anonymous source close to the matter, not an off-the-record hallway comment. It was on the record, taped, and fully accountable. And in those interviews, Wiles did not dodge a single name. She spoke bluntly about Vice President J.D. Vance, a man who was once a never-Trumper before becoming a central figure of MAGA. According to Wiles, Vance's transformation was not driven by belief or principle, but by political calculation when he ran for the Senate. She described Vance as a conspiracy theorist for more than a decade. This is unprecedented. A White House chief of staff openly undermining a sitting vice president. No euphemisms, no hedging. Russell Vought, head of the Office of Management and Budget and the architect of Project 2025, was described by Wiles as an outright right-wing fanatic, while Trump has repeatedly tried to distance himself from Project 2025. The person who actually wrote the plan holds one of the most powerful positions in the administration. And the person who understands that best, Susie Wiles, said directly that this is an extremist figure. There is no way to explain this away as a misunderstanding or media distortion. But the most politically damaging part of the interviews was not about J.D. Vance, Elon Musk, or Project 2025. It was about Epstein. Susie Wiles confirmed that Donald Trump's name appears in the Epstein files, on flight logs, and within social connections during a period when both men were single. She said there was no serious criminal wrongdoing, but at the same time, she completely dismissed the accusations Trump has used to attack Bill Clinton, stating there is no evidence Clinton ever went to Epstein's island. More damning still, Wiles sharply criticized Attorney General Pam Bondi for handling the Epstein matter as a total failure. The released files, she said, were nothing but empty binders. The promises of a client list were just words. According to Wiles, such a list does not exist. This was not merely a personal critique, it was an accusation that the administration deliberately misled the public about one of the most sensitive cases in modern US history. Wiles also acknowledged that she had told Trump directly that this term should not be a revenge tour. The two had an implicit agreement that retaliation would stop after the first 90 days. But once that period passed, actions targeting former political opponents continued. When asked about the case involving New York Attorney General Letitia James, Wiles admitted it could be seen as retaliation. Most strikingly, she did not stop Trump. She laughed and said that Letitia James had held $500 million of Trump's money. In that moment, the line between the rule of law and personal grievance nearly vanished. Wiles also broke with the White House's official line on Venezuela. Not about fighting drugs, not about regional security, but about forcing Nicolas Maduro out of power. According to Wiles, Trump wants to keep pressing until Maduro cries uncle. This was a direct admission that the goal is regime change, something the White House had always denied. She also made clear that if Trump wanted to expand ground operations, he would need congressional approval, a rare legal concession and a sign that constitutional limits are being pushed to their edge. At this point, the picture comes into focus. A president who believes he has no limits, a chief of staff who understands that clearly but chooses to steer rather than block, an administration that knows the risks, knows the contradictions, and keeps moving forward anyway. The question is no longer what Susie Wiles said. It is why she said it and why now. And more importantly, now that the curtain on power has been pulled back, who will pay the price? Trump has boasted that his second term is more stable, less chaotic, and plagued by fewer personnel scandals. That is true, but not because Trump changed. It is because Susie Wiles changed how the White House operates. Unlike John Kelly in the first term, who saw his role as restraining Trump from dangerous decisions, Wiles does not position herself as a barrier. She calls her role a facilitator. She advises, she counsels, but when there is a disagreement, Trump always wins. Wiles herself admits that when things are evenly balanced, the final decision always belongs to Trump. But that is where the line between management and abdication begins to blur. What Susie Wiles said goes beyond shock value. It creates a chain reaction Washington understands all too well. When a White House chief of staff speaks, the issue is no longer personal. The power structure itself begins to tremble. The first reaction did not come from Trump. It came in the form of silence, an unusually heavy silence. No rebuttal tweets, no truth social explosion, no furious press statements. For a man known for instant retaliation, Trump saying nothing was the most telling signal of all. In Washington, silence is never neutral. It is calculation. But because Trump understands one thing clearly, Susie Wiles is not easily replaceable. She is the only person so far who has kept Trump to a zero from sliding fully into the chaos of the first term. Firing Wiles would not just mean losing a staffer. It would mean admitting that the entire narrative of a more disciplined second term has collapsed. But if Trump cannot move against Wiles, others will pay the price, and the first to feel that pressure is J.D. Vance. After Wiles' remarks, insiders say the discomfort inside the vice president's office is impossible to hide. Vance was not just labeled a conspiracy theorist, he was stripped of the single most valuable currency in Washington politics: moral legitimacy. When the White House chief of staff says Vance's MAGA turn was pure opportunism, that is not personal criticism, it is an indictment. Vance's problem is that he cannot strike back. A public response would mean a direct confrontation with the person who controls access to the president. Silence means accepting that image as it spreads. In both scenarios, his position weakens, and in Washington, when a vice president starts to look replaceable, the political clock has already started ticking. The instability does not stop there. Wiles' comments about Pam Bondi and the Epstein files deepen a problem the Trump administration has never resolved: a crisis of trust, not from opponents, but from MAGA voters themselves. Epstein was one of the few issues Trump promised to fully expose. When the White House chief of staff admits the releases were empty, the message to voters is unmistakable. They were promised more than the administration was ever willing to deliver. That is especially dangerous for Trump, because his political base is built not on compromise, but on personal trust, on the belief that he tells it like it is and gets things done. When an insider says the process was sloppy, even deliberately misleading, that image begins to crack from within. Venezuela is the next piece that raises the stakes. Admitting that the real goal is to force Maduro from power puts Trump in a legal and political bind. For decades, US administrations have avoided openly using the phrase regime change because of its enormous political cost. When Wiles said it outright, she not only contradicted the White House's official messaging, but also pulled Congress into the equation. And once Congress is involved, Trump's freedom of action narrows. All of this feeds a larger question spreading rapidly through Washington. How much control does Trump really have over his own administration?